commandment, they really include the whole Torah. The first one was the positive commandment. You should accept Hashem. That includes all the positive commandments. Because if you accept Hashem, then naturally you observe all His commandments, like a king. If you accept the king and you accept his sovereignty, then you will follow whatever he tells you to do. And Layilacha, also the same thing. If you don't worship any other gods or any other idols, then you won't violate Hashem's will. So therefore, Anochi, which is a positive commandment, includes all the positive commandments. And Lo Yilecha, you shouldn't have idols, includes all the negative commandments. So what we brought up last week, that's where we left off. We left off with a question. If this is the explanation, that means there's really no connection between the 248 mitzvahs aseh, the commandments, and the 365 negative. They're not really connected to the first two. It's just that if you accept Hashem, then whatever he says, you'll listen to. It's like a king, for example. If you accept the king, then if he tells everybody that 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, everybody should drink a gallon of water, you have to drink a gallon of water, but there's no connection between that and accepting, and the content of accepting the king. There's no, these two things are not really, in essence, connected. So the Alter Rebbe explains this in Tanya. In fact, to a certain extent, we can say that the whole section of Tanya, from 18 till 25, revolves around this. First, let me explain it in a simple way. That's number 44. In a simple way, the Alter Rebbe says that it's love for Hashem that's the source for all the 248 mitzvahs. Ava is Sheresh. Sheresh means the root. The Ramach mitzvah say for the 248 positive commandments. Yira, fear of Hashem, Sheresh l'shasal loises is the root for the 365 negative. What does that mean? That there are two emotions, love and fear. In reference to Hashem, love means loving Hashem, and fear, we're not talking about fear of punishment. That's a very low, simple, childish level of fear. We're talking about, because I love Hashem, I'm afraid to do something that would chas v'shalom take away from the relationship. In other words, when you, good morning, when you love someone, you want to be connected to them. And therefore, you don't want to do anything that might cause that this relationship should be broken up. Makes perfect sense. So the same thing with Hashem. The only difference is that the emotion, which is Ava, love, is an emotion that motivates a person to do something. Because I love the person, I want to get closer to them. And therefore, I'll do this, I'll give a gift, I want to speak to them, I want to meet with them, I want to see them. When the feeling of fear is an emotion where I pull back. So therefore, love is the root of all the positive commandments. Because I love Hashem, I'll study Torah, I want to give tzedakah, I'll matzah on Pesach, I'll blow here the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. These are actions through which I can embrace Hashem, connect to Hashem. Because I don't want to lose that relationship, I won't do anything that could interfere with the relationship. So therefore, I won't desecrate Shabbos, and I won't eat something that's not kosher, and I won't forget to say Shema or to daven or to whatever it is that I need to do. So basically, the negative commandments, which is abstaining from doing something, that comes as a result of yira, fear, where I'm pulling back. The positive commandments, where I'm being proactive and doing something for Hashem, that comes from love, which motivates me to do things. But this is still, in a way, still not 100% explaining how the nature of each mitzvah And the content of each mitzvah is actually connected to the content of Anochi and La'ilacha, which is all about Avodah Zarah. So, how does the Alter Rebbe explain it? One of the cornerstones of Chassidus, one of the cornerstones of Tanya, and that's explained mainly in these chapters, again, starting from 18 and concluding with 25. Because this is a chapter where the Alter Rebbe explains the short road. If you remember, when you start learning Tanya, it starts off with a cover page where the Alter Rebbe says that there are two paths how to serve Hashem with all your heart and soul. One path to get there is a long path, and the other path is a short path. So the long path is the one that's from chapter 1 to chapter 17, including 17. And the shorter path is the one that's from 18 till 25. And what is the difference? The first path, which is considered the longer path, explains how to develop an emotional bond with Hashem comes mainly through meditating on the greatness of Hashem or meditating on different things about Hashem. And the more I understand Hashem, this will generate and stimulate feelings of love in my heart or other emotions, depending on what I'm meditating on, what I'm thinking. And this is the reason why it's called the long road and the long path, is because it's not so simple. First of all, the concepts are very deep. They're very abstract. And not everybody is so capable of understanding the greatness of Hashem. It's something which you need to have the intellectual capacity to be able to really get it. And even someone who could, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So it's called the long road. But then there's another path, which is a shorter path. What's the shorter path? The shorter path is, well, I've explained that every Yid has an unconditional love for Hashem naturally. We don't have to create it. I don't have to produce it. It's already there, but it's hidden. And if I meditate on the fact that I have this love for Hashem, naturally, this will bring that, just thinking about it and recognizing it and focusing on it will bring it up closer to the surface. And that love for Hashem will bring me to observe all the mitzvahs. And how does the Alter Rebbe explain it? So he explains it based on this. Avodah Zarah doesn't mean worshiping an idol, saying a person says, he doesn't believe that Hashem created the world. He believes the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations. That's not what Avodah Zarah is necessarily all about. Of course, that's also idol worship. That is idol worship. But Avodah Zarah is also, if a person believes in Hashem and believes that Hashem created the world and believes that Hashem created the moon and the sun and the stars and the constellations, but yet he worships them because he believes that if he worships the sun or the stars or the constellations, they will give him what he needs. And that's Avodah Zarah. In other words, Avodah Zarah is attributing authority and independence to those things that Hashem created. The reality is that they're only a channel through which Hashem does things in this world. So of course the sun gives us warmth, and the sun gives us light, and the sun gives us energy, but chas v'shalom, to worship the sun and think that because I'm worshiping the sun, I'll get more sunlight, I'll get more energy, I'll get some more bracha. The sun has no independent power of its own. It's Hashem doing everything through the sun. So if a person does attribute independence to the sun, that's called Avodah Zarah. And now the Rebbe goes on to explain that in essence, it's not just about the sun or the moon or the constellations. The general idea of attributing any kind of separateness, any kind of independence to anything outside of Hashem, that's on a smaller scale, in a more subtle way, also Avodah Zarah. In other words, true belief in Hashem means not just that Hashem exists, that Hashem created the world, that Hashem is running the world, but that Hashem and the world are one. And Avodah Zarah means a separation. That if I don't recognize that oneness, and if I believe that the world is separate and independent of Hashem, That is avodah zarah. So in fact, according to this, the Rebbe explains, this is really the essence of what Torah and mitzvahs are all about. It's all about doing whatever I can to connect to Hashem and to express that connection. And the reason why Hashem gave us 248 positive commandments means these are 248 different ways how to express my oneness with Hashem. When I learn Torah, I'm connecting my brain to Hashem. When I give tzedakah, I'm connecting my hands to Hashem. When I observe the mitzvah of going to the Beis Hamikdash by foot, I'm connecting my feet to Hashem. And when I eat kosher, I'm connecting my stomach to Hashem. Basically, all the mitzvahs are about 240 ways about connecting to Hashem, that their connection will be all-encompassing. But each mitzvah is another expression, another way to express how I and Hashem are one. And the same is the reverse. Klipa, by definition, as we learned in Tanya, doesn't necessarily mean evil, like killing, being violent, being vicious, being a savage. That's not necessarily evil. That's evil the way we use it in the common language. But in Tanya, when it talks about klipa, klipa means anything that sees itself separate from Hashem. And therefore, Hashem gave us these 365 commandments, which means each one of these commandments are that if you eat chametz on Pesach, you're giving strength to klipa, to that separation. If a person desecrates Shabbos, they're giving strength to klipa. If a person eats something not kosher, they're strengthening klipa. So basically, if we think more about it, then this is what the whole idea of Tanya is, that all the mitzvahs and all the averas, they really revolve around one point. And that's all about my oneness with Hashem and not being separate from Hashem. And that's why love is the source of all the mitzvahs. If I love Hashem and I want to be one with Him, then I'll do all those things that connect me with Him. And if I don't want to lose that connection, which is the fear, as a result of that, I won't do anything which connects me to klipa, which is a separation from Hashem. And therefore, it means that the first two really include the whole entire Torah. It's all about, and the reason why the Alter Rebbe says this is because what he concludes is one of the ways of a person becoming even a Beinoni without learning very deeply and understanding deeply all the spiritual things that help us develop love for Hashem, just being aware that I have this unconditional love for Hashem and the fact that I naturally want to be connected with Him, once I get to realize that every mitzvah to observe and every avera that I violate is like avodah zarah, if a person understands that and really feels that, that will give them the strength not to violate anything in Torah and not to miss out on any mitzvah. The person says to himself, if God forbid I would be confronted with this kind of choice of doing avodah zarah or not, of course I'd give up everything and not do avodah zarah. So once I understand that any avera is like avodah zarah, then that'll give me the strength not to do any avera, and that's avera. Does it sound familiar to what you learned in Tanya? Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to go back to number 39, number 40, which is another subject, but it's all connected to this also. This is also based on Gemara. So let's just look inside to see what it says in the Gemara. This is on page 12 in the booklet. Also one of the most famous Gemaras on the subject of Matan Torah. So on page 12, on top of the page, Darash Reb Simai. Rabbi Simai said the following: B'shar shagdimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma. When the Yidden said nasa v'nishma, so there's another medrash that comes before this. The medrash is that Hashem turned to the children of Yishmael, and he asked them if they would be willing to accept the Torah. And he asked them, what does it say there? And Hashem also turned to the children of Esau, and he asked them if they would be willing to accept the Torah. And he also asked Hashem, what does it say there? I'm imagining that probably means, just like they were, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Navi, the prophet of the Jewish people, and Hashem spoke to the Jewish people through Moshe. The other nations also had prophets, like Bilam was the prophet of the nations. So they probably also had a prophet, and through that prophet, Hashem asked this question. And they asked, let's hear what's in there. So to one of them, Hashem said, it says, do not commit adultery. And they said, well, that's not for us. Another one, he said, do not kill. And the children of Ishmael said, that's not for us. And basically, they rejected it. And then he came to Bnei Yisrael, came to the Yidden, and they said, they didn't ask any questions, what's in it? They just said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we'll listen. We don't even have to hear from you what it's all about. We're ready to do whatever it says in Torah. That's what, and in fact, in the Chumash, you have this pasuk where it says that Moshe came to the Yidden and they said, everything Hashem says, we'll do. Everything Hashem says, we'll listen. So these are the two terms, Na'aseh and Nishma. So b'shosh hagdim Yisrael Na'aseh v'nishma, when the Yidden said Na'aseh v'nishma, bo shishim ribu malachi asharis, 600,000 angels came, and they came to every single Yid. And what did they do? Koshel shnei ksarim. They tied 2 crowns to their heads. Echad keneged nasha. One crown is corresponding to the word nasa, and another crown is corresponding to the word nishma. Kivin shechotu Yisrael. Once the Yidden sinned by worshipping the Egel Azav, the golden calf, Yardu Meya V'esem Ribu Malachi Asharis, 120,000 angels descended, which means 2 angels per person, Upirkam, and took away those crowns. Shenema, Vaisnasel B'nei Yisrael Esyeja Mehar Chayr. They were taken there, were stripped of their jewelry from Mount Chayr. What jewelry is it? The crown that they got. And it goes on with more details. Many Maimarim and Chassidus from all the Rebbes of Chabad, starting from the Alter Rebbe, begin with these words, and they explain what is the meaning of Na'aseh v'nishma. So there are a lot of explanations. Yes, they all have something in common, but each Rebbe added different points and understand it from a different angle. But the general point is, what is the difference between Na'aseh and Nishma? I mean, the obvious question is, even if you're very devoted and you're very loyal and you're ready to do everything and anything, you still have to listen first before you can do. If you don't listen, then you don't know what the person wants you to do. You have to listen, hear all the details, and then you can do it. So by saying Na'aseh v'nishma, as if first we'll do and then we'll listen, that's not going to help us. So the word nishma doesn't only mean listen in the literal sense, audio, listen with my ears. Word listen can also mean to understand and comprehend. Like when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, it means to understand. And in fact, even in our language, common language of people, we use that term. Someone tells you something and you say, I hear what you're saying. I hear your point. And that's what it means. Basically, there are 2 kinds of mitzvahs. There's certain mitzvahs which are mitzvahs that we can understand. Mitzvahs that are logical. It makes sense. And we, with our logic, can explain that it's an important mitzvah. Then there are mitzvahs which are called chukim. Chukim means mitzvahs that are not logical. We can't understand why milk and meat can be mixed together. Milk alone is kosher, and meat by itself is also kosher. And yet, if you have them together, it becomes treif. Where did it come from? Each one individually is perfectly kosher and purely kosher. How is it when you have them together, they're treif? The laws of mikveh, the laws of purity and impurity, totally not understood. This makes you pure, this makes you impure. And if you're immersed in a mikveh, the impurity goes away. Nothing in the world, a person could wash himself, like the Rambam writes, with all the oceans of the world, it doesn't take away their impurity. But if they immerse in a mikveh, 40 saw, the way it is in halacha, they become pure. All these things are called chuk, and we can't understand them. So when it comes to these mitzvahs, you have to do it just because Hashem said so, even though I don't understand. That's called Kabbalah's oil, accepting the yoke of Hashem's sovereignty. Hashem said to do it, so we do it, whether we do understand or not. And Nasa and Nishma means that those mitzvahs which we could understand and the Torah which we could study and understand intellectually, we're going to make every effort to understand as much as we can understand. So both things are important. And therefore, they're the two crowns, one crown for Nasa and one crown for Nishma. But that's not what it says here. It doesn't say because it said Nasa and Nishma. If you look again at the words, it says, B'shah shegdimu Nasa Nishma. At the time that Israel preceded, we will do, and preceded that before we will hear, before we will listen. In fact, there's another medrash that says that Hashem made 3 crowns. He put the 2 crowns on the heads of his children, and the 3rd crown he put on his own head. Where does the 3rd crown come from? There's Nasa and there's Nishma. So the answer is 1 crown is for Nasa, 1 crown is for Nishma, and the 3rd crown is for putting Nasa before the Nishma. What does it mean? It means that even if a person has the difference between Nasa and Nishma, and Nasa means unconditional loyalty, unconditional acceptance, and Nishma means to understand and to comprehend. And Hashem wants us to do both. But still, it's possible that a person does the part which is Nasa, unconditional acceptance, but it's based on the Nishma. I learn, I understand, and I know the greatness of Hashem, and based on that, I have this unconditional commitment to Hashem. That means that the Nishma comes first. First meaning not chronologically, but first, in figuratively speaking, I understand Hashem, and it makes so much sense to me, and it really rings truth, and therefore I accept Him, and I'm committed to Him unconditionally. So the commitment is unconditional, but it's based on my understanding. And that's something which is not good enough. It's because that's going to be limited. The way it's supposed to be is that the Nishma comes after the Nasa. And then will be a true unconditional commitment. And the reason for this is because seichel, intellect, even the most brilliant intellect in the world, is something which is influenced by personal interests. Sometimes consciously and sometimes subconsciously. In fact, most of the time it's subconsciously. People don't realize, but they make decisions and things make sense to them. And the real reason why it makes sense to them is because there's something that I'm going to gain, a certain benefit that I'm going to have, or I'll have a certain loss if I do it one way or another. And subconsciously, that's what guides my brain to produce the logic to justify that I should do what I want to do. You remember we once spoke about the fact that the Kohen Gadol, remember about the Kohen Gadol, that he can make the decision. He's not allowed to be part of the Beis Din that are going to decide whether there's going to be 2 others or 1 other. Because if there's 2 others or 1 other, it's going to make a difference whether Yom Kippur will be warmer or a little bit colder. And what does he care? Because he has to immerse himself in the mikveh 5 times. And if it's colder, it'll be uncomfortable. And if it's warmer, it'll be more comfortable. And the Rebbe asks, this is the Kohen Gadol, and he's going to go into the Holy of Holies. And this is not on the spot. We're talking about 7 months earlier. And it's not about whether he's going to go into ice or he's going to go into warm bathing, warm water. It's about a few degrees of warmer or colder, that's all. And yet, that little bit could influence the way he thinks, that because he wants to be warmer, he'll make a decision that there should be one other, not two others. And it's subconscious. So this is the rule that intellect subconsciously is influenced by our personal interests, and we have to make a tremendous effort to be able to think about things in a purely objective way. And therefore, if a person's commitment to Hashem would be based on logic, even if after that they will say, and because of all this, I'm unconditionally committed to Hashem, but if the basis is the understanding, then if something shifts in my understanding, there's something going to be a shift in my commitment to Hashem. And it's very possible that that'll happen if Chas v'Shalom there'll be a tremendous loss if I follow a certain detail of a mitzvah, or on the other hand, there'll be a tremendous gain. And that's why the nasa part has to come first. There's a famous mashal that's given, which could be used to explain this as well. The mashal of a person who once visited a forest and he saw hundreds of trees, and every tree had a target drawn on the tree, and in each target there was an arrow in the bullseye, but couldn't be more precise. So we figured there must be somebody here who was an amazing, talented person, and he wanted to find the person, find out how he did it, how he was trained, and he finds out it happens to be a very young kid, and he's asking him a million questions: who trained you, and how long did it take, and what did you do, and how whatever he needed to know. And then he tells him that I do it different than most people. Most people first draw the target on the tree, and then they shoot the arrow. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I shoot the arrow on the tree first, and after the arrow's in the tree, I draw a target around it, and it always comes out in the right place. What's the mashal? The mashal is that if my commitment to Hashem is going to be based on logic, then sometimes I'll get it, and sometimes I'll be off the mark. Because of my personal interest, it'll influence the way I think, and things that are not right will make perfect sense to me. I mean, I think we see this now in the most blatant way, in the most illogical way, but we see it. People are intelligent, and people who are professors, and people who are intellects, not just intelligent, their life is all about intellect, are coming out saying that this is justice, that turn the tables around, that the Jews are committing genocide, and never the poor Hamas are never being attacked, and they're victims, and everybody is basically criticizing the victim and giving encouragement to the murderer. That's what's happening, and it's all under the explanation and the guise and the cover of justice. And yes, there are certain people that know exactly what they're doing, and they're distorting the emes. And there are certain people that follow them that think that they're really being sincerely very just, and they're fighting for justice. That's the way the brain works. These people are anti-Semites, and because they're anti-Semites, therefore they find all sorts of reasons to make it make sense that it's perfectly okay to do what they did, make the world a better world by doing it. It's what the Nazis did, what everybody else does. So this is very, very black and white. Everybody could see it, but it happens to all of us in so many different things. So therefore, it's not enough to be Nasa, not enough to be Nishma, but the Nasa first has to be an unconditional commitment to Hashem. I shoot the arrow. I know that this is it. Now, when I'm going, once I know that this is the emes, and this is the way Hashem wants it to be, and I'm committed to that, now when I want to understand it with my seichel, I'll be able to understand it, but my seichel, by doing that, will be guided to go in the right direction. It won't be influenced by my personal interests. I'll be able to make that decision and understanding in an objective way. The only question that's asked is, what do I need the seichel part altogether? if seichel is such a dangerous thing, that thinking about it and understanding could be misleading and it could be influenced by personal interests, then wouldn't it be much better to just say Nasa, Hashem, we're committed. We don't even need to understand. We don't have to make any effort to understand. We'll just be committed to you, loyal, do whatever you say, and we don't even have to go into delving into the understanding and the reason and the logic and learning Torah and all these details. Why do we need that for? Yet they got a crown for Nasa and they got a crown for Nishmas. So obviously that's what Hashem wants. So the explanation is that if we would just do what Hashem wants because He told us to do it, basically our connection to Hashem to a certain extent would be an external connection. That means it's the mitzvahs and the Torah that we and everything else about Yiddishkeit didn't really penetrate, even though it's unconditional commitment. But there's a part of me that really is not engaged in a certain extent. Which part of me? The deepest part of me, the part that's the real me, is not engaged. That's the seichel, my intellect. My hands are doing the tefillin, my feet are doing those mitzvahs, my mouth is eating matzah, my other organs are doing what they're supposed to do. But my brain, my intellect, which is sort of the essence of who I am, and this is what thinks, and this is what makes decisions, and this is what functions and causes everything else to go on throughout the day, that part of me is uninvolved. So the fact that I learn Torah and I understand the mitzvahs and I understand Hashem and I understand the purpose of creation, whatever I'm learning and understanding, that makes the Torah and the mitzvah, that makes my connection to Hashem become internalized in a way that can only come through learning and understanding. So the learning and the understanding has to be. But if it would be only that, then it would be shaky. It wouldn't be something which would be 100% solid. Because, like we said before, personal interest has to be this commitment. On the other hand, the commitment alone means that it wouldn't be internalized. So by the learning, it becomes internalized, and therefore we need both. And when we need both, we also need that the nasa should be the basis, and the nishma is what comes next. There's one more thing which is even deeper. I'll just at least mention it briefly. In some places of Chassidus, it says that the Nasa and the Nishma, and even the Nasa coming before Nishma, is still the two crowns. There's a third crown which is even higher than that. What's the third crown? What's higher? So if you look at number 40, it says the two crowns is having bittul laharatz and bittul to Hashem's will. What's higher than that is bittul not to Hashem's will, but balaratz and the master of the will. Again, it's a very deep concept, but generally speaking, how could we a little bit explain it? It means that being devoted and dedicated and loyal to Hashem's will, to Torah, to mitzvahs, and everything, sometimes could be on such a level, and so devoted and so dedicated to what Hashem says and to Hashem's will, but there's still something going to be lacking. And to give an example, there's a story that maybe you covered it in the Parsha class, that when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, they came to the Yam Suf. The Yam Suf split, and all the Egyptians, they themselves drowned. But there was a lot of gold and silver, because they went to war with their chariots, and their horses were decorated with gold and silver. And the Yidden were told to take that gold and silver, just like they were told to take the gold and silver when they were in Egypt. And then it says that Moshe Rabbeinu told them, okay, now we have to stop. We have to move forward. We have to go to Har Sinai to receive the Torah. So there's a word in Chumash that's used, which Rashi says it means that he made them go against their will. They didn't want to leave. They wanted more gold and more silver. They didn't want to leave. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to force them to let the gold and the silver be there and just move on. We have to go to Matan Torah. That's what it says in Rashi. On the surface, it's very shocking, because how could it be that they just witnessed such a revelation of godliness by Kriyas Yamsuf? It says that what they saw when the Yamsuf split, they saw godliness in such a revealed way that even the greatest of the prophets didn't experience what they experienced. So they just saw Hashem, they saw godliness. Also, they were craving for Matan Torah. They started to count before already. That's why we count the 49 days. And yet, gold and silver distracted them completely, that Moshe Rabbeinu had to force them to let go and move forward to Har Sinai. So obviously, it can't mean on a very simple level that that's what was going on. What was going on is a little bit deeper. Why did Hashem tell them to take the gold and silver? Anyone know the reason behind that? Chassidus? Right. It says that there were nitzutzes, there were sparks of godliness in Mitzrayim, which was contained in this gold and silver. And that was the ultimate purpose of going out of Mitzrayim and taking the sparks of Tohu and elevating them to Kedusha. So that was the point. And that's why the Yidden were passionate about taking the gold and silver, not because they wanted gold and silver, but because they wanted to do this mitzvah of taking out the sparks. When Moshe Rabbeinu told them, okay, now stop, and we're going to Matan Torah, the reason why they were hesitating or why it was difficult was not because, oh, we can't leave all this money here, but because they were busy doing such a great mitzvah that they were so passionate about what they were doing, they couldn't let go. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to sort of schlep them away and say, now it's time to get the Torah. What happened here is something very deep. They were committed 100% to what they were doing, which is great. But what happens when Hashem himself gives a message and says, stop doing this mitzvah, I want you to do something else now. I can't. I'm so passionate about what I'm doing, I can't let go. If you analyze that, it means I'm more passionate about the will of Hashem than Hashem himself. Hashem himself is telling me, stop what you're doing. I need you to do something else, and I can't let go because I'm so passionate about doing what Hashem told me to do. That's called bittul to the ratzon. I'm passionate to Hashem's will. Deeper than that is I'm passionate to the source of the will, to the master of the will. Whatever he wants. If he wants me to stop, I'll stop. If he wants me to go, I go. And it doesn't really make a difference. And of course, being passionate for the mitzvahs in itself is an amazing thing. I want to give you an example of something very practical. There's a famous story that's told with the two brothers, Reb Zusha and Reb Elmal. There was two Hasidic rabbis. They were brothers, both very great tzaddikim. For a period of time, they traveled from place to place, and they traveled as if they were simple beggars. But really, they traveled and they visited people. They made a lot of people do tshuva. Later, they became known openly as a big tzaddikim, and each one had a big courtyard of Chassidus. So what happened was that one of the places where they were there, because people thought of them, okay, thank you. People thought of them as just regular beggars. Someone accused them of something. They both got arrested, and they were in jail. Thank you. So one of the brothers said to the other brother, says, I see you look very down. What do you look so down for? So he says, why? Look where we are. We're here in this jail. And the jails years ago, it was not like today. There was no plumbing system. So basically, there was no bathroom. They had a bucket, and that's where all the filth was. we can't daven here, can't put on tefillin, I can't make a bracha, can't learn Torah. What kind of life is it? So the other brother said, well, wait a second, who's the one that put us here? Hashem. Who's the one that told us that we shouldn't daven and we shouldn't learn and we shouldn't make brachas? It's Hashem. In his Torah, he says that in this place we can't do that. And he told us to go into this place. That means by not learning and by not making brachas and by not davening, we're fulfilling his will. So we should be happy that we're fulfilling his will. And the other brother says, you know, you're right. And they both got excited. They're very excitable people. They started to dance and sing. And all the goyim that were in the room were clapping their hands, and it was a big commotion. And the guard comes running over and says, what's all this commotion about? So one of the guards points to the bucket and said, I don't know, but they're all jumping around about this bucket, something about the bucket. So he said, yeah. He walked over and took the bucket out of the jail and threw it out. Baruch Hashem, now we can daven, we can learn, whatever. Part of the story is, you see what you accomplished through Simcha. But the other part of the story is, if this is what Hashem wants, in other words, right now he wants me not to, like in this case, he wants me not to collect the gold and the silver. Here he wants me not to daven. It's like there's a story with the Rebbe Tzarivka. It's in Hayom Yom. The Rebbe Tzarivka, who was the wife of the Rebbe Marash, of the fourth Rebbe of Chabad. So she was once sick, and the doctors told her that she must eat the first thing in the morning. But she always would daven first and then eat. She didn't want to eat before davening, so what did she do? She got up an hour earlier and davened, and then she ate. So she ate after davening, which she ate in the time that she would normally be before davening. Of course, it didn't help her because now she had even less sleep. So, Rabbi Marash apparently told his father, Tzemach Tzedek, and he spoke to her and he said that Torah wants a person to be healthy, has to be strong, and he told her that she should eat before davening. And this is the famous quote, if you ever heard, better to eat in order to daven than daven in order to eat. In Yiddish, it rings even better. But he added one word and he said, and you have to do it b'simcha. In other words, if your custom is, I don't want to eat before davening because the first thing in the morning should be for Hashem, not personal. And now I have to do this thing for myself, which is eating. So Tzemach Tzedek answered, if this is what Hashem wants you to do, it should be b'simcha. That's called bittul to the Balarach, which means my dedication, my loyalty is to Hashem. And if Hashem commands me that I'm in a situation where I have to do things this way, that makes me happy. That should bring me simcha, because this is what Hashem wants. Okay, so we have a situation there with Rabbi Ozdaba, can't come in today, he's not well. And I messaged Rabbi Anoka if he could come instead. But my message was a one-way message. So I have a suspicion that he's not coming, which means you could either daven very long today. What happened? Kriyas Yamsuf. We spoke about Kriyas Yamsuf. And then we demonstrated. So I'm sorry. We'll have to use the extra time for something.